Today, we start on the second class in the skill guide series, by popular demand, the Necromancer, who serves a role very similar to the Paladin as a support character with a decent amount of power under the hood, though utilizing some slightly more complicated mechanics to do so. One of the most distinct differences between them is how instead of using support auras to aid allies, the Necromancer casts curses upon them to weaken them. So today we're going to look at easily the three most popular of those curses: Amplify damage, Decrepify, and Lower resist. The reason these curses are so popular is they do something very few skills can do, and that is penetrate immunities, as well as normal resist of course. Though due to being curses and only being able to have one active at a time on a target, you need to choose wisely for the situation, and each of these does have its place. Starting with the simplest of the three, we have Amplify damage, a skill you hate to see enemies use on you, but will love casting on enemies. Simply put, regardless of the level of the skill, it will provide minus 100% physical resistance to the target. This means if they had, say, 33% resistance beforehand, they would drop to negative 77, which can be a massive boon if you're in a party with reasonable physical damage, or if you're using an army of skeletons to do your bidding. As far as what plus skills actually do for it, since it does not change the actual penetration, is that it provides a fairly significant boost to not only radius, but also duration, meaning you'll be refreshing it far less and needing less casts to cover an entire pack. Now, for immunes, Amplify damage sadly still suffers from the usual 1/5 penalty for its reduction, so if an enemy happens to have 100% physical resistance, it will only reduce them to 80% because of the penalty, and due to not being able to pierce physical resistance in any other way alongside amp damage, this is about the limit of what you can do with this penetration, so you really need to consider whether it's better to aim for removing the physical immunity, or if you should instead focus on elemental resist with something like our next skill, Lower resist. This is because Lower resist, much like Amplify damage, is an immunity and resistance piercing skill, and may see a bit more use by other characters thanks to its appearance on the new runeword Plague. Now, unlike Amplify damage, Lower resist focuses on the enemy, elemental, and poison resist instead, starting out low but quickly approaching its hard limit of 70% as it gains levels. This of course combined with the improved radius and duration as well. Now, Lower resist is special in that it is the only way in the entire game to penetrate poison immunity, and at high levels it will strip immunity from almost every enemy in the game, with only a handful of exceptions, even with the 1/5 penalty. This combined with the handful of minus poison resist items available in the game results in poison necromancers being able to easily compete with the likes of blizzard sorceresses and hammerdins for S tier status in the post game. Now, on top of this, it also provides that penetration for lightning, fire, and cold, which can be important for various groups and even builds in the same game as well. So it serves as a sort of light backup for helping push conviction over the edge to break even more difficult immunes to these three elements. And the fire penetration specifically can be especially valuable due to improving corpse explosion damage against physical immunes, far more than Amplify damage, unless the enemy is, well, dual immune to fire and physical. Now, you may have noticed that we did the level 1 and level 30 skill and skipped over Decrepify. This is because Decrepify is a weird one, since it is sort of a jack-of-all-trades curse that also happens to penetrate immunities. Specifically, it provides a 50% reduction in physical resistance, rather than 100% like Amplify damage, but to make up for this reduction, it comes paired with a number of other nice effects, such as 50% reduction in enemy damage, as well as a fairly significant slow target style effect. Now, for the physical resistances, it works just like Amplify damage, just half as much, but for the other two effects, there are some things to remember. The enemy damage penalty just applies to their physical attacks, and is part of the same stack as +% damage effects. So, for example, if an enemy has 110% enhanced damage from Fanaticism, from, say, Desace, and you Decrepify them, they would still have 60% enhanced damage, since the Decrepify effect just subtracts from the 110, rather than from the base damage. As far as the slow effect, this stacks on top of the other speed modifiers, such as Holy Freeze, Slow Target, Cold Damage, and Clay Golem effects, so it can be part of the formula to reduce enemies to the bare minimum speeds, resulting in astronomical attack delays, essentially turning them into the next best thing to a statue. Now, weirdly, in spite of this, Decrepify is generally the most popular just due to the fact that it spawns on Reaper's Toll, as well as runewords like Wrath and Lawbringer, making it an easily accessible tool for most classes to penetrate physical immunity. In terms terms of how useful it is for the Necromancer, it depends on your gear state and build. If you're having trouble surviving, or you're going more for a support, then it's a godsend. However, whenever you reach extreme late game for things like summoners, who are the primary users of physical piercing curses, you'll actually end up favoring amplified damage, as you will reach a point of being able to kill things fast enough to prevent a threat that way, rather than relying on simply neutralizing the threat until your minions can kill it. And needless to say, it's used in a similar fashion for corpse explosion based builds, though there's even less excuse for them to use Decrepify. That said, regardless of your favorite, these three curses are the most used in the game for good reason, but it doesn't mean there isn't a place for the other deadly tools in the Necromancer arsenal. So what are your favorite curses outside of these three? Do you favor the AI manipulation ones or the more support utility ones? Mention it down below, and as always, a special thanks to the channel members, patrons, and Twitch subs that make this content possible.